we as men, we need a place to belong. And unfortunately, our society doesn't provide that. Because what happens is when you separate men from each other, they start to embrace this lone wolf mentality, which I've done for a really long time. But what happens through that is that you just...
We hear the term toxic masculinity a lot in these days.
Mhm.
What do you think that is?
I think it's bullshit. I guess you're talking about my identity when I was living in Dubai, right?
Yes, that's the
what
one.
you're talking about, with the suits and the 500 euro shoes and the 300 euros perfumes and the watches and all of that. I did it all. I did the breathwork and the yoga and this and that, sound healing, and I tried it all. And I remember, man, there was so much shit coming to the surface. Some people have no idea what it means to be a man. And I think I'm specifically talking about women because they are not a man, so they don't know how much weight we carry.
How do you get men to remember who they are?
Welcome to another episode of On Path, where we explore the mindset, the hardships, and the strategies of other creators, entrepreneurs, and change makers, so you can apply the lessons to build a healthier, wealthier, and more fulfilling life for yourself. In today's episode, we are talking to Rene Schrenker, who is the creator and facilitator of the Warrior Movement Men's Circle. Rene has left a successful personal trainer and sport manager career together with the bling bling Dubai lifestyle in order to embark on a journey of self-discovery and respond to his inner calling and life mission, which is to empower men to own their greatness and create a life worth living. I have personally attended many of Rene's circles, and I cannot think of anything more transformative in the past couple of years than these gatherings. With Rene, we talk about his personal story. We talk about the importance of bringing men together, creating spaces for self-discovery and brotherhood. We also talk about the essence of masculinity, and Rene also explains his point of view on toxic masculinity, if that's even a thing. We also touch on what people get wrong about men's circles and many more. But before we jump into the episode, hit that subscribe button. That allows us to bring on other interesting guests as well in the future and to continue the work that we do here. Did you do it? Okay, great. So now to the episode.
You as a person and also what you are doing with Warrior Movement, that helped me a lot. Not just because it helped me to be more in tune with myself, but also to let those trapped energies out that I was holding to. And also it helped me to build really good friendships during the circle. Because the way I see the Warrior Movement is it's almost like an accelerator program for friends. Because you do so much shit together.
Yeah.
You suffer together.
Yeah.
And yeah,
It bonds you in a way.
Hmm?
I think it bonds you in a way.
Absolutely.
Especially as men, like knowing that there's someone next to you who goes through the same shit and who doesn't pull out and who has your back and who sees you in the process of leaning into the discomfort. I think it's something incredibly transforming for every single man that is part of that, you know?
Yeah, and that's why every single time when I recommend this to someone to go and show up, everybody loves it and everybody thanks me. And it's almost like I'm the one who's taking the credit because I'm the one who told them about it, right? So also, you remember Fabian?
Yeah.
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 He messaged me 2 weeks ago that he's coming to Bali. He couldn't make it, unfortunately,
For sure.
because he had to go to Dubai instead. But he messaged me that he will try to come to Bali on a way that he can make it to the Warrior Movement on Saturday, so we can go there together.
Isn't that
So
crazy?
that's
That's
the validation,
crazy,
man. That's
Like,
the validation.
It's crazy for me too, you know, because how can I say that? I think it ties to what I just acknowledged about you. It's like you're just leaning in and you just trust that there will be ground underneath each step that you take. And you have no idea where it might take you. So you do not just trust that there will be ground underneath your feet and you're not going to step into nothing, but also you just trust without expectations that it will lead you somewhere where you can just feel a little call. You just hear something. Like it might be just a whisper. It might be just even a sound. It might not even be a clear word or something that the mind can grasp, you know. It's more about, I think, that you start, how I always love to say it is, you start living from the inside out. You just listen to what calls you deep within, and then you follow that. And I think it will take you to places that you would have never thought it would take you, because you stopped listening to that. You still listen, but in a different way. You don't let this voice be the driver of your life. You let this voice be the driver of your life. And I think when you start following that, I think you will be you become in awe with what life has in store for you. And because you don't limit yourself through concepts that you hold in your mind, which are only references to what you know, right? From the past. What's ahead of you can be so much bigger than the past. So to actually limit yourself mentally can sometimes, I think, the biggest trap, because there might be something around the corner which you might not recognize because you're too focused on what you think you need to follow up here. While when you follow up here, you still follow the little whisper of your mind and the things that are coming your way. But when you start listening here, you open yourself up to a whole new path that this, in some moments, can't even comprehend. How did this come together? How? But deep within, you know for sure it did, because you trusted that. And I think this is something so magical when we, as men, and as everyone, men and women, can follow that. We will be totally surprised where life will take us. And this is just how I love to live my life, because I want to look back at the end of my life before I take my last breath. And I want to look back. And I was talking to a client today about that. And I said, I know deeply at the core of my heart that I will look back and I will laugh my ass off and tell myself, what a fucking crazy journey that was, man. And I don't regret anything about it. And that's just how I want to live my life, you know. And I recognize more and more that we as men, we have a part inside of us that wants to live from that place, from that deep connection, I think, with life, you know. So, and I see that in you. I see that in all the...
You did that too.
Yeah. It pays out, and I feel like it pays out in a deeper level. So, yeah, man.
You know what you mentioned about your mind and your heart? The way I see it is almost like this is the guide,
Yeah.
this is the protector. And the more I started to operate knowing that, I think the better decisions I started to make. Because I'm not saying that it was only true in the past, but also in current days as well, that I operate from here most of the time. So for me, it actually takes a conscious effort to quiet that voice and listen to another voice that I haven't embraced yet. And every single time when I do that, I have no regrets. And it just works. But it's been a very long journey to actually get to this point, to even talk about this stuff. Because I feel like I'm from a very different world.
I know.
I'm from the world of ambition and money and startups and building something, building legacy, all of that stuff, which is great and it's still there.
Yeah.
But there is a different way how you can operate about it. And I think bringing the two worlds together, that's where I see my role.
I like that.
That's why I think we talked about this, how I see myself. I I want to be the bridge. I want to be the bridge between how to allow these two worlds to communicate with each other, because sometimes they just don't speak the same language.
Yeah.
And sometimes it comes across too fluffy, that, you know, let's say a modern way of thinking about those things, it just, oh, this is just like some humbug bullshit, something, right? And from the other side, they also don't understand.
No. You know what the thing is? I think it's just perspectives.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of, when we sometimes come down to the core of things, we can actually able to recognize that there are a lot of similarities.
Mm.
Because even what I just shared, it takes a huge amount of work. Like what you just said, you need to get out of your mind and back into your body. That takes
yeah.
effort. Same thing like you build a startup. So I think there are dots that are connected in both worlds, you know, and it's the perspective. I think it's about opening up the perspective and actually see that it's not so much about what is the right thing. That's I think we need to let go of that, because
Yeah.
what we need to open ourselves up to is like what about this resonates with me, and how can I implement that into my life? And then you like you said, you bridge that, you know, and you can do this for yourself, because I've been there. I've been just on the woo woo side and just like drifting off, like just sitting on the river for hours and and thinking that my business would just magically manifest itself. But I realized, no, that's not, like I was bypassing something big there too. So I needed to open myself. I mean, I think it just comes back to openness and actually following that calling, because you know, even no matter if that's the woo woo or the Western, however you want to call it, if we're just too trapped up here, we just limit ourselves. And I think sometimes, and it reminds me of a book that I love. It's called The 40 Rules of Love. And
The 40 Rules of Love.
yeah. It describes how Rumi became the poet that he is known for, right? Like in nowadays. And he had this companion who taught him those rules. And I remember that there was one section in this book where Rumi was a scholar. He was huge, right? Everyone was looking up to him. He was teaching. He was seen as someone very high up in the ranks of society. And in that moment, when the scene that I remember from the book, Shams and Rumi, they sit on a bench in front of a river. And Shams, he asks Rumi to go to the tavern, to the pub, and get wine. Which was back then like, you're Muslim, you don't drink alcohol. That is like, oh my God, like, and everyone was freaking out. Everyone was like, oh my God, like this Shams, he's like the devil. And Rumi went. He just trusted him so much. He went, got the wine. And what happened afterwards was they sat down. Shams poured the wine out and just left a little bit left. And then they drank just a sip. And he said to him, the biggest prison we can build ourselves is our own beliefs and our own concepts. And the greatest, most courageous things that we can sometimes do is to break free from our own beliefs, to break free from what we think is right. And that was some of the biggest learnings for me, because I think the way I look at it is we break free from identities, which is not really who we are. It's identities that we build around certain concepts and beliefs that are holding us trapped towards who we think we are. But with that comes also a certain sense of, I need to protect myself. Because if someone attacks my identity, I need to protect that. But if we truly know who we are at the core of our level, it doesn't matter what someone else says to us, because we know ourselves. Doesn't matter what belief I have, no matter what, you just know yourself so deeply and so well that if this is your opinion about me, that's okay, cool. I know myself deeply, so I don't need to be scared that you might take anything away from me. And in this way, what I'm talking about is the identity.
It's very funny you mentioned that, because that's also something I wanted to touch on.
Yeah.
That you had a very different identity before you started doing the things that you are doing.
Many.
I don't even know them, right?
Yeah.
But when I was just going through your Instagram stories, your highlights, and I saw the pictures of you, how you even looked like, the clothes you were wearing, the things you were doing,
Yeah.
I was like, this is a different person. So what happened there? What was the trigger for you to step away from that identity that you had back in the days?
I guess you're talking about my identity when I was living in Dubai, right?
Yes, that's
That's
the
what you're
one.
talking about, with the suits and the 500 euro shoes and the 300 euros perfumes and the watches and all of that stuff. That's a good question. I think there was a point in my life at that time where I tried to be someone other than myself. And I think the blessing that I received at that time, being someone who has been raised in a very small town in Germany with 70,000 people, where most of the people get born, live, and die. Like their whole life operates in this city. Me having the courage to go to Dubai and almost like living a dream that I had which I could have not even imagined when I was 16 or 17, right? Like, oh, you're going to be a successful personal trainer in Dubai, living there, making money, like being able to afford all those fancy things, right?
Which year was that?
That was from 2017 to 2018.
Okay.
Yeah, I was living there for 1 year.
So it's 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember back then, I felt more lost than ever. And it was confusing. It was pretty confusing for me because I thought I figured it all out. I even had people when I was visiting my hometown, people coming to me in the gym, bro, you made it. That's how people were looking at me, and it was a huge step. I see that, but it didn't feel like it. And that made me just question things. I was like, okay, cool, I'm in Dubai now and I can keep following that route, right? Of more money, of more status, of more whatsoever. But I somehow knew it didn't feel right. That's just what I remember. There was something about it that was telling me inside, wait a moment. And I remember how fucking hard that time was because it wasn't like, oh, wait a moment, go this way. No, it was just, wait a moment. And then just wait, sit in that discomfort of where you are right now. And I just remember like being so fucking lost somehow. Not externally. I had it all figured out, like with my work, my business, my status, whatever, but internally. And I asked myself, I remember that, is this really who I am? Is this really where I want to go? Is this really my purpose? Because back then, I didn't really knew my calling. I didn't really knew it. I knew that I want to help people, but when it came to that time, something inside of me was just, wait a moment. And I waited. And then magically, you know how life works, I had a new client signing up with me. And she was she was Indian, and she was handing me a book by Sadhguru. And it was called Inner Engineering. And I was reading Eckhart Tolle before. It wasn't that spirituality was something that I've never heard before. It wasn't that it was something that I was like, oh, what the fuck is this? No, I heard about Eckhart Tolle, the pain body, and being
What
in
is
the
that?
present moment. Eckhart Tolle is a well-known spiritual leader, who wrote the book A New Earth, and in the spiritual community, he's very well known. And I was reading those books. I heard about it. I talked to friends about it, but I didn't really get it. And I remember this client giving me that book. And Adam, I don't know when it was the last time back then when I was reading a book. I was not a reader. The way I perceived information the best was through YouTube, through video. And I couldn't stop reading that book. And there was something inside of that book, I think that was just put a big question mark inside of me. It was almost like there is another way. I have no idea how that way looks like for me, but there is another way. And one thing that I've always somehow done was somehow following my calling, knowingly and unknowingly before, where I took huge leaps out of my comfort zone, huge leaps of faith to really do the one thing that everyone told me not to do. And somehow, and I remember that moment, I would love to share that moment. I was 1 month holiday in Bali. That was my first time traveling alone for holiday with 26, 27 to Bali. And I came here and did all the shit. I did it all. I did the breathwork and the yoga and this and that, sound healing, and I tried it all. And I remember, man, there was so much shit coming to the surface. And I had a month holiday in Germany, visit my family, and then it was about to go back to Dubai, right, doing my work. And I remember halfway through the month with my parents, I was at my dad's place, and I was sitting in a meditation, and I had a vision, and I saw this guy standing with his back to me, having a backpack, and he was just waving like this, come, come. And I was sitting there, and I was like, what do you want, man? Like, what the fuck? You know, like, I remember that, like, just like, what the fuck do you want, man? Like, leave me alone. And he kept waving and waving and waving. So I was just sitting with that vision. And then he turned around and it was me. And he was pointing towards the Himalayas. He was pointing towards like a big Ganesha statue. Got out of the meditation. I called my boss and I quit my job.
On the spot.
On the spot. Didn't tell anybody. I quit my job, and back then, even in Dubai, there was no Zoom. You couldn't even do WhatsApp calls. So I just sent him a voice note. I was just like, hey, just want to let you know, like, you always encouraged me to follow my own path. It's time for me to do my own thing. And I don't know where it would take me, but I need to follow that. And I quit. So I told all my clients that I quit my job, and I remember I just booked myself a ticket to the ashram of this guy, and I went to India. I mean, I went first to Dubai back then and sold everything that I have. Everything that I had, just have the backpack that I still have now, and just minimalized my life. And then I went to India. And that was a huge step out of my comfort zone. And don't get me wrong, it sounds pretty epic when I share the story, but 3 days later, or even 2 days later, my mind was going nuts. I was like, the reason I'm sharing this is because I think when we sometimes hear those hero stories, however you want to call them, we can sometimes perceive, oh my God, he must have known. It was just like he was so solid in every decision. No, I wasn't.
I was about to ask, where did you get the courage from?
It was just there. I just knew. But my mind was going nuts. I remember
How
that
did
my
you know?
mind was crazy. You remember what we were talking about in the beginning? That I somehow, I always had this deep, and I didn't know that for a really long time, but I was somehow always deeply connected with my intuition, which when I was younger, 16, 17, it always got me out of trouble. I always knew something inside of me was like, bro, it's time to go home. I get a call 3 hours later. Oh yeah, this guy got stabbed. Like you know, in the hometown where gangs were going against. Something inside of me was it was almost protecting me. It was always like knowing, you know. But I didn't know that back at that time, and I just followed that, man. I just knew in that moment, and I also knew in that moment when I quit, I need to do it now. Otherwise, I will not do it. Because if I my dad would have, I'm pretty sure he would have supported me, but my mom would have told me like,
people step in, your mind steps in, trying to protect you. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Start making you doubt.
My dad has always been. I have to give him incredible credit. Me and my dad, we are really close, and he somehow always told me to follow my path, and he always encouraged me. He always told me a story. He always told me a story which I would love to share with you. And he shared that with me just a couple of years ago when I was going through a really, really, really challenging time. You know, those times when you question your decisions, where you question, was this really, maybe I should have just stayed in Dubai, that kind of moment. And he said to me, you know, there were two men in a prison, and I found a way out. And I jumped over the first wall of the prison, and I kept going. The 30th wall, and I kept going and going and going. 60th wall, and I slowly started to lose the courage to keep going, you know. And in front of the 99th wall, they stopped, and I looked at each other, and you said, you know what? I think we should turn around, man. What they didn't know was there was only one wall left. And when he said that to me, and I remember that, I was like, fuck, man. You know, sometimes you make decisions, and people might think that, oh, man, that's stupid. But what I was able to recognize is that you get to know yourself in those moments in a way that no one else can tell you. No one else can teach you. No mentor, no coach, no nothing. It's those moments where you have to meet yourself in the deepest, most profound ways. And I think what you start recognizing in those moments is, okay, that's life, man. That's who I am. That's where I'm at right now. And I think what you do is you meet life in a very vulnerable way. Because what you almost say is like, life, I have no idea where you take me, but I'm somehow in for this journey. So let's just fucking go. And you're not saying it like, fuck yes, let's go. For sure. When everything is perfect and everything works out well, that's how we step into that. But in those moments, I remember that there was almost like this humility to life of like, look, the decision I made, I might regret this for the rest of my life, but I would love you to prove me that this is not the case.
I think that's very beautifully said, and it also reminds me to Jeff Bezos' regret minimization framework, which says that when you are at an intersection and you have to choose which path you are going to take, which one are you going to regret the least, right? So, for example, when he started Amazon, he had a very nice job at a great position with a cushy salary, everything was set up for him, right? Then he got this idea for an online store, right? And he asked this question from himself: which one am I going to regret later more or less? Is it going to be that I took the chance on this business and it didn't work out, or I didn't take a chance on this business? Lucky for him, it all worked out, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We all know his story. But I think it's very applicable to so many things in life.
And I would even say, I love what you just said. It all worked out for him, right? This is what we see. We look at success. We look at, oh, he has, but you know what? Even for the people where it didn't work out, it worked out, I believe, to 100%. And you know why? Because it's exactly that. They meet themselves. It's a wisdom that you extract from life when you start living it. And you don't live life up here. That's not where you live life. And that's unfortunately, where most of us live our lives. And I was sharing with you that quote. I was sharing in the Warrior Movement community in a WhatsApp group a quote the other day. I can't really fully remember it, but it said, if you know every step along the way of your life, you're not living your life. This is not your life. And I think it so beautifully ties back to what we were talking about in the beginning. It's the unknown, the courage to constantly meet life and yourself in a deeper, more profound way. And I think since I'm working with men, what I can see with them is it's this depth where they feel comfortable in and where they receive a lot of meaning. Yeah.
So I'm sure that when you started your men's circle,
Mm-hmm.
right, there was a lot of unknown.
Oh yeah.
Can you tell the story how you started that, why you started that, and what actually led you to start something like this?
So I would love to start with the why. The reason I started my man circle here in Bali was because I realized that I was craving man in my life. I realized, hey, okay, I have incredible friends everywhere over the world, but somehow I don't have them here. And I was craving physical presence. I think that's what this was all about. I was craving physical presence from brothers, from men. And I just knew from before me doing men's work and surrounding myself with other men before. I've been sitting in man circles before in Sanur. I've been sitting in online man circles. I've been doing a lot of work myself with other men in closed containers. And it was so interesting because I started realizing that there's a very potent medicine. There's something very potent in man coming together. And you know it. And I believe a lot of men don't know that they actually need that in their lives. And that was also a big part of my why is I want them to experience that. I want them to know that there's something out there where they can belong and remember. And the how was I was walking at the beach with our friend Atlas, and I remember telling him like, hey, I have this thing. I would love to just gather men together. I would love to really build a man's community here in Bali, especially the area of Canggu. And I remember we were walking at the beach where we always do it, and I was pointing towards him. I was like, and I would love to do it right there. And I was like, my mind was immediately coming up with excuses of like, oh, but you know, the plastic, there's dirt. Like, how do you want to do it? Like, there's so much stuff sticks laying around and whatsoever. When I think about it, like now looking back, that this was an excuse for me to procrastinate, me giving my first and holding my first man circle, procrastinating for 4 or 5 weeks. That was at the procrastination point of like, you know, it's quite messy here and dirty and whatsoever. That's where my mind caught itself in procrastination. And I was talking to him and he said, just do it, man. Just do it. Start on Saturday. And I was
How did that make you feel like?
man, it was, you know, it was like when someone cuts through your bullshit and just points directly to that part of you that is scared of actually putting himself out there. That's how it felt. But I love challenge. I love to challenge myself. And especially when someone else challenges me, I'm like, okay, I'm all the fucking. So I said, okay. And that's how it started. Like it was just him and another friend. You know, it wasn't like even the structure and the framework that you experienced, that the men experience who are coming now, it wasn't there. It wasn't that I had it all figured out. Not at all. It was just like start. And there was a part of me which was like, same like before when I quit my start and just step into the unknown. Just follow, just trust. It will all come together. It will always somehow magically come together. And that's there was another one, right? Why, the what, and what was the last part?
What led you to it? But I think it's kind of
It's all connected. Yeah. Yeah. It was, I remember that. And then I started from there. And I think then I made a commitment to myself to, okay, every Saturday I'm going to show up here. every fucking Saturday. And I have to give big shout out to my mentor who has been holding his circle for 4 years. And in those 4 years, he missed, because of retreats that he was holding for men, maybe 4 circles in 4 years. And I remember there was something admirable about that.
That's commitment.
That's commitment. And I realized that's what I want to do, man. That's what you're going to do. And I could just feel there is something in it. Did I know where it would go, how big it would get, and the opportunities that would arise from that? No idea. Didn't even thought about that. It was just about, Rene, just show up and just be in the deepest, most profound service that you can be for the man that have the courage to lean into that. Yeah.
So that's again another perfect example why it's important to have such friends in your life. Because a real friend is really going to cut through your bullshit, is going to call you out on your bullshit, and is going to empower you, going to encourage you, yet accept you who you are, but going to create an environment for us to grow and realize our highest potential.
Yeah. And
So
I would even say having a brother in your life. And I'm not dismissing female friends, but having a brother. Because if a brother looks you into the eyes and says, bro, I know you're fucking scared, but I'm going to fucking hold you accountable to what I know you're capable of. That lands so much deeper from my own personal experience than having a female friend who says like, oh, I believe in you. You can do this. Because what Atlas in that moment saw was what I wasn't able to see. And I needed that reminder in that moment. And I think having this from him, a brother who I deeply trust, it was like, you know what? Okay, if he believes in me, even if I might not believe in myself right now because I'm just scared and I might overthink and think that I need to be perfect, okay, I will do that. And that's what I mean. There's a medicine in brotherhood. And brotherhood can be a group of men, but it also can be a relationship between two men. You know?
we are living through a loneliness epidemic.
100%.
We are more isolated than ever before. What do you think your men's circle, the warrior movement, give to men that they may be lacking in their life without being part of this?
A place to belong and remember who they are.
And how do you do that?
When you ask me how am I doing that, what are you exactly talking about?
How do you get men to remember who they are?
Stripping away all the noise and let them sit with themselves. And when I talk about sit with themselves, it's not just about literally sitting with themselves, but maybe the better words are letting them face themselves. Face to face, like raw, real, and honest.
Why do you think that's important?
Because each one of us already has everything that we're looking for. It's just that we're looking for it at the wrong place. And the reason I believe this is important is because that's where I believe we really get to know ourselves. And where we find true confidence in who we are and not what we do.
You know, it resonates with me so much is because that's exactly what I got out of the circle as well. So I started to hear my voice more than ever before. And I think before I started attending these gatherings, I felt that my thoughts were not even my thoughts. They were coming from somewhere. It's almost like I was programmed to think that way. And as you said it, when we are able to strip that away, you really get to know the true you, the raw you, and throughout a series of different activities that we also do on those gatherings.
Yeah.
Sometimes we sit with ourselves, and sometimes we challenge each other, meeting an edge,
Yeah.
right?
And edges can, I think it's so interesting because every time I talk about edges, I think a man's mind immediately goes to, oh, I'm pushing myself in the gym. I'm pushing myself for a run.
That's how I thought about it the first time when you said that.
Yeah. That's where we immediately go, because that's also where I believe that society, created a certain picture around meeting our edges. And yet, sometimes the deepest edge that you can actually meet, I believe, is being silent, not doing anything at all,
That's an edge for some.
being with your feelings, being present with the sensations that you feel, allowing the challenge that you experience inside take up space and hold that. Be present with yourself, not trying to run away, not trying to distract, not trying to escape. Be with it. Turn around and face yourself. And facing yourself has so many different layers, so many different forms, shapes, and ways. But that's where I think true self-mastery comes into place, because if you can meet yourself moment to moment, you attune yourself to what it is that you need in each moment of your life.
What do you think that most people get wrong about these gatherings, a men's circle? The reason why I'm asking is
I would love to know.
because I got so many different kind of feedbacks or questions. What do you guys do there? And there were some that were fully in support of a man going to a men's circle. Someone even told me, if my man doesn't go to a men's circle, that's a red flag for me. And I'm like, what? Really? So that was interesting to hear, because some women even started to think that a man going to a men's circle equals to that man is actually taking care of himself, and he also has a brotherhood to lean on, right?
Yeah.
And which allows that man to be in touch with their both like masculine and feminine side, and know exactly how to embrace both sides of it. On the other side, I also got some questions, or maybe like comments, that the person was telling me that I'm not in support of men's circles. I'm like, why do you say that? Because she overheard how man was thinking about masculine and feminine, and she had this interpretation that what's happening in this men's circle, it's like building toxically masculine men. And I was like, have you ever been to one? Obviously not.
Obviously no.
Obviously
For sure.
not, right? And I tried to explain that that's exactly the opposite that we do there. We actually learn how to build that masculine container so we can allow the feminine to flow in that freely. And that's what the feminine energy is actually in need for. So anyway, there are different kind of ideas, different interpretations and understandings of what a men's circle is and what we actually do there. So going back to my question, what do you think that most people get wrong about it?
That's a good question. Well, I think what immediately comes to me is that some people have no idea what it means to be a man. Some people have no idea, and I think I'm specifically talking about women, because they are not a man, so they don't know how much weight we carry. how much we try to be there, show up, give. And I think from that place, it's very easy to judge something from that place of, from that limited perspective. I think it's really easy to judge that. Because we as men are human too. And society portrayed us or conditioned us to, I think, demonize and disconnect from ourselves and to just live in our heads. And I think the moment we actually reconnect with our humanness, we realize that we all need a place to belong. That we all need a way to get in touch with ourselves and to actually be seen, witnessed, supported, and challenged by other men in this case. I'm not sure if this answers your question, but that just came up for me. And to be truly honest, I don't even care if people get it wrong, because I don't care about those people, because most of the people, like you shared, they just listen to something from afar, which they might not even fully grasp, because they're not even part of the conversation. And from that place, they make that judgment. And no matter what I will tell that person, it doesn't matter, because they already made their opinion. So I don't even bother. I don't even try to find what those people get wrong. I think what I try to say with that, and maybe that makes even so much more sense, is what I want them to get right about it is that we as men, we need a place to belong. And unfortunately, our society doesn't provide that. Because what happens is when you separate men from each other, they start to embrace this lone wolf mentality, which I've done for a really long time. But what happens through that is that you just sit with your own shit over and over and over again. And we need places where we can drop that weight and let that weight be held by other men, just if it's just for 5 fucking minutes. That we can just remember our strength, remember who we are, remember what we're capable of, and see ourselves sometimes through the eyes of another man. We need that. We're not fucking Superman. It's like, we are human too. And I think that's sometimes what's easily forgotten about. Yeah.
It goes back to what we just touched on earlier, that it's important to have openness towards a different perspective.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think some people or many people just simply don't have because they are lacking understanding. And that was also my intention with sitting down with you. Because when it comes to this kind of discussions, somehow feminine and masculine always come up as the main topic. So what does masculinity mean to you, and how is that present in our day-to-day life, in your opinion?
That's a very good question. What does masculinity mean for me? Masculinity for me means... So here's the thing. There are 2 different ways I would answer this question. The first way would be, masculinity for me is presence. It's this deep presence, that unshakable presence, this space. Like I always explain to you guys, it's the riverbank that holds the river.
I love that.
And the river is the feminine. It's life, it's energy, it's everything that is changing. And I think masculinity for me means to be able to live in the present moment. And I don't even want to say that this is masculinity. I think this is just the way I try to live my life, and it includes both. And this is like, it's so hard to separate those two because they go hand in hand, And I think the moment when you deepen your presence, you're actually able to receive life in a whole new way. And in this case, what I try to do on a Saturday gathering with you guys is that you do not just cultivate and expand your riverbank and deepen that bank, that deepen that presence, but also at the same time learn to sit with the waters, the crashing waves sometimes that are pushing you to your edges, like to be able to sit with that. Because what I think, what comes through that, and maybe that answers your question about what masculinity means for me. But what happens through that is that we actually we are able to live in harmony with ourselves. And if we live in harmony with ourselves, we live in harmony with our community. We live in harmony with our friends, with our partner. We live in harmony with the world. And I think what masculinity means for me means being able to cultivate that harmony for yourself. Take this responsibility and carry it out there as a leader, as a man who provides that. A safe space, because what that does, and this is just my own personal experience from the work I've invested into myself, and I've shared this with you guys too, you become a safe harbor. And maybe that's what masculinity means for me. You're a safe harbor for whatever comes your way to arrive. And it can be you, your own emotions, your own feelings, sensations, perspectives, whatever it is. But it can also be your partners, your friends, brothers, sisters, family, random people, the world. You're able to hold that. And you're able to be the safe harbor who welcomes it all. That's the thing. Who welcomes it all. Because you realize that your ability to be present with that is what makes you alive. That's what aliveness is. And we as men, we sometimes tend to go to extremes, right? Oh, I push myself and I run 5,000 kilometers, which is cool. Hey, man, I pull my hat in for every man like who's really pushing their limits. And we all have our way. And what I recognize for myself doing that many times, like big time, running from Uluwatu to Canggu and doing all kinds of shit. There was always like an attempt of getting in touch with life, feeling alive. Fuck, man, in this space right now, I feel alive. And I think what I try, or the intention behind what I'm doing, the service that I'm providing, is to just help man that being alive is not out there. Being alive is right here inside of you. And if you can cultivate such a deep presence that you can pick up on the fine nuances, the different movements, the different waves, the currents of your own inner aliveness, of what is present inside of you, man, you will be in more service to the world than you can ever imagine. Because your kids, your partner, your mother, your father, your brother, sister, your community, the world, they will feel that. Not just one moment, they feel that every single fucking day. And you will impact more people in a humbled way. Not in a way of like, oh, I have Amazon, I built that crate. That's what I meant before when I shared that. They still find that. Because it doesn't matter where it goes, you just show up every single day. And it took me a little bit longer to answer your question, but I think that's what masculinity means for me. That's what it means for me to be a man.
I can definitely second that from my personal experience as well. Because the moment I started to work on my inner self, it also manifested in physical form in so many different kind of ways, whether we talk about physique or business or connections or relationships or whatever your heart actually desires. But only because of one simple thing, that I started to work on my inner self. And I dare to get in touch with my own emotions and my own demons that I didn't want to do before. And that's something that Atlas also mentioned during our podcast, that you as a man, if you are unable to or don't dare to get in touch with your own feelings, then eventually you are going to explode.
You're going to be enslaved by them. You're giving your power away. What all my work is about is regaining power. But not power in the way we know power, how it's portrayed in the world. It's a very humble power that you just know that you can. And it's not you run out there on the streets and have to prove it to everyone. You don't need to do that anymore because you know who you are. It's not borrowed by what you do or the identity that you build around yourself. It's earned through the work that you've put into yourself. And when you earn something, you don't have to convince anybody. And that's what I realized. And it's that still presence, that's still power, which is untouchable. And I think that's where one trait that we all men, I believe, go for. That's where freedom lies. Freedom in many different ways. If that is like not giving a shit what other people think. The freedom of just following that call no matter what other people might say. Maybe even your own head. Maybe even your own mind. Because what's most of the stuff that is up here is just conditioned, man. It's not you. And what happens is when you do that inner work and reconnect with your heart and go deep inside, you start purifying that up here. And your mind starts to become more clear. And it starts to see things as the way they are. And you start to slowly extract and sweat out all the bullshit that you have been taking on for your entire life, that you think is yours, but it's not. It has been given to you. And it has been given to you for a reason. It has been given to you because that thing, that wound, that trauma, whatever that is, it is a catalyst for you to go out there and look for something. But there has to be a switch where you start turning around and you start inquiring and you start to go deep. Because that's where you can find the true gifts of that. And from that, what you're able to give to the world are the true gifts that you are here to bring. And then you realize, I don't have to become another The Rock. I don't have to become a Beyonce or a Jeff Bezos. What you start realizing is, you know who I need to be? Me. And that's when you find confidence, real confidence. Where you go out there and just realize, you know what? I'm not here to become someone. I am here to be me. Fully. All of it. Embracing it all. Knowing myself so deeply that no matter who comes at me, you can brush it off.
It reminds me to a couple of things. One of them is a video I just saw recently from Gary Vee, that one of his fans walked up to him, and I can't remember exactly what she was saying, but the most important part of the conversation was that she was saying that once when I'm going to become someone, and Gary interrupted her
I
like,
love that.
you are already someone.
That's the game.
And
He said that's the game or something.
you could see how she had this aha moment.
Something inside of her relaxed.
Probably she was trying too hard
For
to
sure.
become someone who maybe it's not even her.
Yeah, for sure. That's the game. I think he even said that. I don't remember, but he said something that's the game. You start realizing that. And you know what you will do? You will shine brighter than you will shine brighter than ever before. Because what will people do is your own liberation encourages others to liberate themselves. What all those people do is they don't encourage you to, oh yeah, that's the business and this and this and this. What they do is they're just themselves. But people can't look through that. They don't realize that. They want to become the next Gary Vee. Like she was, oh, I want to become somebody. And a reference might have been Gary Vee or someone else. But when you can fully own who you are, what you will do is you will discover the uniqueness that you are here to bring into the world. And that uniqueness is exactly what the people need. And people come for that. Not what you're doing. You guys do not show up on Saturday because of what I'm doing. You guys show up on Saturday because of what I'm bringing. Sometimes the framework changes. Like no one sits there and be like, oh my God, that's different than last time. That feels no, it's not, because the essence is the same. And I think what that does is it liberates you. You know why? Because you are able to learn, and what you shared before, you're now willing to step into the unknown because you realize that your actions are not defining who you are. And that liberates you on such a deep level where you have the courage to go out there and try. You go out there and try over and over and over again. Because you realize that, hey, I will fail. I will fall. But that doesn't define who I am.
I just would like to make a comment on that,
I would love to.
because maybe our actions don't define who we are, but they are definitely a reflection of who we are, right? So working on ourselves, and then our actions are actually going to be put out in the world to show our
Definitely.
true self. And I actually wanted to make a reference to some of the things that we were talking about. We talked about masculinity, we talked about power, we talked about embracing all of those.
Presence, yeah.
Yeah. We hear the term toxic masculinity a lot in these days.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that is?
I think it's bullshit. I think there are healthy ways and unhealthy ways how to express your masculinity, and also unhealthy ways and healthy ways how to express your femininity. That's it. To put a label on someone, and like, we miss the point. What do you try to prove with that? That something is wrong? Oh wow, I'm pretty sure that will help someone who might struggle, who might need to learn something. Oh, that will encourage him so much that he will go out there and actually inquires for himself how he might be able to change. It doesn't. What you do is you wrong someone. But if we talk about healthy and unhealthy ways of expression, we don't point the finger to say there's something wrong with you. What we're saying is like, hey, your actions are definitely not in alignment with how you should show up.
So what are some of the healthy ways or unhealthy ways of embracing our masculinity?
I think there's so many nuances to that it's really hard to express or explain or say it's this and that. That's not really what I stand for, but what I can say is I believe unhealthy expressions come from wounded places. And that might show up in whatever way. Power over, control, interrupting. I'm just referring to what I'm doing, because I'm not perfect. But I'm interrupting my partner when she tries to share her feelings with me because there's something uncomfortable for me. My wound shows up and triggers me. Oh, I'm interrupting her, or control, or whatsoever it is. We try to put power over, control, we interrupt, I think the unhealthy expression mostly come from feeling triggered by something. you know, and not being able to face that. And the healthy ones come from, you know, being able to sit with that and meet yourself and take responsibility for how your actions affect the world around you. And what do I mean by that? If you don't give a shit about how your actions, then you come from a really unhealthy place, right? You don't give a shit. You start expressing unhealthy ways. But when you start to recognize that you have a really huge responsibility and that your actions affect others, what it did for me was I started to inquire, how do I want to show up in the world? And how do I want to leave the world behind? And that was something. How do I want to impact the world, you know? And that's when you then start to inquire, oh, that behavior, that's not really the impact that I want to have. So you start inquiring, okay, and what do I then need to do? And I think then you slowly, what you're literally doing is you're just tending towards the parts of you that you have been neglecting, that you have been pushing away, that you have been locking away, hiding behind closed doors. You tend towards yourself, like before, what you shared. Everything external is just a reflection of the internal. Your external environment is a direct reflection of your internal. And you can read a lot through that. And if you're able to cultivate the awareness and the presence to pick up on that and then go deeply inward, you will be guided to places inside of you where you know what is needed. And then you listen to that call, you listen to that voice, and that voice will tell you, you know what I need? I need to sit with myself. I need some time to fucking let go. Or I need a little bit more love because maybe I'm too hard on myself right now. And I think that's when, you know, that transition happens where unhealthy patterns start to transition into healthy ways of living.
So our mutual friend Atlas told me something very interesting. From his work with men, he asked them what are the main emotions that they experience the most. And what they said was happiness, anger, and horny.
What was the third?
Horny.
Horny. For
It's
sure.
there. So anger is there, right? And when I think about masculinity or a masculine man or toxic masculinity, whether we like it or not, these emotions are going to come and go. And it's your duty to know how to contain that, how to navigate that, how to get in touch with those emotions and feelings. And exactly as you said, toxic behaviors or actions coming from wounds. So the way I see it as when somebody displays more of a toxic behavior that has a direct impact on others in a negative way, that almost feels like that their self is leaking out through a wound that they have not managed to fix. So that's already a sign that there is some work that needs to be done.
And you know what that brings up? Compassion. The clearer you get, the more you're able to sometimes see through people and actually realize that what's underneath the words that they're saying, there's just someone who hasn't been loved, someone who hasn't been listened to, someone who has been scarred in a way that he now carries those scars out into the world because he doesn't know how to deal with them. And that's exactly what a man circle is all about. A man circle is not about fixing each other's wounds or fixing each other. No, it's about creating a safe space for men to discover themselves. And wounds, behaviors, patterns that are not serving us is part of that. And that
Yeah.
is hugely important, because instead of demonizing, right, man circle, or this is toxic masculinity, we can actually have compassion. What does compassion do? It actually encourages you. That's how we can change the world. That's how we can have an impact. You know, and that's how we can really then encourage someone to look deeper. And you know what I love is when men come together. There's this I see myself in you. When a man shares deeply what he's going through right now, the challenges that he's facing, how he's fucking down on his knees and he's willing to throw in the towel, every single man who sits there can relate to that in some way or the other. And there's no man, and I mean, it also depends on the containers that the man who's leading the circle provides, right? There are different intentions, there are different circles, like, but I think it's if there's trust, if trust and safety is one of the intentions and one of the values that are really, really important, and privacy, which is really, really important, if that is all there, what happens through that is that men are able to do that work, to shift those patterns, to shift those behaviors. And they are not judged for, oh my God, you're so toxic. No man sits there and just points the finger. No, because they can relate to some way or the other. And what we really come down to is the truth of, man, you're struggling with this right now, and I see you, man. And that's okay. There's nothing to be fixed right now, no solution that we need whatsoever. I just see you in your challenge. I see you in your pain. And that's what I always share with you guys. It's about supporting each other, witnessing each other, celebrating each other, and challenging each other. All of that. Because that's what brings out us. That's what helps us to remember who we are.
After the first Warrior Ventures, you remember when we did the testimonials?
Yeah.
And you had this question, what is one thing I learned from that experience?
Yeah.
Do you remember what I said?
No, I don't.
No.
What did you say? Do you remember?
I remember.
What did you say?
I'm not alone.
I remember
And
that, yeah.
that's exactly what I get out of the circle. And I think that's what most men can get
Yeah.
out of the circle. So,
They're not alone, yeah.
look, I deeply appreciate everything that you do. You know that.
I know that.
And that's why I feel very comfortable and very confident to recommend to every man to join the circle, to join the gatherings that we have, and be part of this experience and explore a side of themselves that they have maybe never explored before. Is there any final message you would like to put out there?
You're the answer. Stop looking for it outside of yourself and start meeting yourself, and whatever you're looking for is right there.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Rene. This has been amazing.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me, and thank you for those wonderful questions.